Okay guys, so I've been investing for a little over 2 years now, and I'm sure you can guess what my favorite part of this whole investing journey has been. Wait, I'm sorry, let's start that over. My least favorite part. Do you know what my least favorite part of investing is? It's reading financial statements. Maybe it's just me in the position that I'm currently in being a new investor, but it seems like reading financial statements is super mundane and boring. You're just seeing a lot of numbers followed by words that you may not understand. I practically don't understand half of them, but it's super important. And trust me guys, I get it. You're watching this video right now and thinking, okay, this isn't a normal video that Darren's been making lately. I've been talking about different types of stocks and other things like that and why I invest into them. But if you're one of those people that has been with me since the beginning, first of all, thank you. But also you'll see that I started off my YouTube channel talking about different financial things that I've learned about as I'm learning them. And on top of that, this is the investing journey, something that I preach on every single day, the journey that we're all taking together. Plus, knowing this information, no matter how boring it may seem at the beginning, is going to be very effective, especially when talking about types of stocks that you're investing in, or me talking about types of stocks I'm investing in. It gives more evidence to why I'm investing to them for the short term or for the long term. So with that being said guys, hopefully by the end of this video, we can break down in the simplest way one of the 3 parts of a company's financial statements, and that's the balance sheet. So a balance sheet is essentially like a snapshot of a company's financial situation within a given period of time. And when it comes to a balance sheet, everything ultimately has to balance. Everything has to equal out. And when we talk about balancing, that involves the 3 main parts consisting within a balance sheet. And that's your asset, your liabilities, and your shareholders or owner's equity. Now, as we go along in this video of me talking to you guys about what an asset, a liability, or a shareholder or owner's equity is, remember this equation because it's really important. Asset equals a liability plus the equity being the shareholder or owner's equity. I've seen it be called multiple things, but let's go on ahead and break this down a little bit. So first you have the asset. The asset is what a company owns. Now in a balance sheet, an asset is going to be split up into 2 different categories, your current and your non-current. Your current assets are assets that can be liquidated into cash within a year, and your non-currents or assets are going to take a little bit longer, a little bit more than a year. And to give a little bit more imagery and give us the opportunity to actually look at a balance sheet, we're going to refer to a company that I talk about on this channel fairly often, and that's MMAT. But keep in mind guys, we're going to be looking at their Q2 balance sheet from this year, 2021. So as we look at the balance sheet, you can see how the first thing listed is their assets. And the assets, as I said before, are split into 2 categories. You have your current, which is boldly stating, and then under that you'll have your total current. Every other asset below it is your non-current. It's not directly stated, but everything under the total current balance is what your non-current is. The current assets are going to consist of things such as cash on hand, restricted cash, which is basically cash that they're holding to use on a specific thing, and their inventory, the value of the items that they have in their inventory if they were to sell them. And under the total current assets, you're going to have your non-current assets, which will consist of things such as plant, property, and equipment, and goodwill. Just to let you guys know, goodwill isn't like what you do when you donate things because you're about to move and you have a lot of clothes. Speaking from experience, the basic situation to define what a goodwill is let's say you're a company and you're worth $1 billion and you go on the market to essentially be sold to another company. Another company is really interested in you, so they buy you for $2 billion. So the goodwill will be the extra money that you accumulate from the sale, which will be the extra $1 billion. That's essentially what goodwill is. But overall, at the bottom of the non-current assets, you'll have that total, and then you'll have the grand total of the assets. Using MMAT as an example, we'll add that to the equation we spoke about earlier. And also one cool side note, when you actually look at a balance sheet, especially when you're looking at the assets, they're actually listed in order of what could be liquidated the fastest. So for example, cash and cash equivalent is already cash money. You can't liquidate it anymore, it already is. Restricted cash is second, and everything else is less likely to be liquidated faster than what's ahead of it. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Now, of course, it's great to see what a company has owned and all the money that they're receiving, all the cash, but every company to succeed needs to be liable for something. They have to pay off something. So you have your liabilities. So unlike an asset, a liability is something that a company owes. And just like an asset, on a balance sheet, it's going to be split into 2 categories, your current and your non-current liabilities. Your current liabilities are anything that a company has to pay off within a year, and the non-current liabilities are going to be things that the company has over a year to pay for. So looking back at MetaMaterial's balance sheet, we're going to see the liabilities. We'll look at the current, and you're going to see things such as rent, utilities, and payroll, things that they pay fairly often and ideally are going to pay within the end of the year. Stuff like payroll is obviously very constant as you have employees. And under that, you're going to have your non-current liabilities, things that are going to take longer than a year for the company to pay. And that will consist of things such as leases, loans, etc., etc. And just like assets at the very bottom, you're going to have the grand total for both current and non-current for liabilities. And that as well as what we can add to the equation that we talked about earlier. And now what we have left is the equity, which I've seen called the shareholders' equity or the owner's equity. It's the equity regardless. So a company's equity consists of two things. First, it consists of the money contributed to the business in the form of investments or stocks, which is something we invest into every single day as investors. And the second one is generated earnings over a period of time. Now, we've already gone over that equation that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the assets equals liabilities plus shareholders. But if you do a little bit of rearranging, you can rearrange it to equity equals assets minus liabilities. That gives you more of an idea that the leftover amount from the assets after paying all their liabilities is what they have left that could be earnings over time and that could be contributed towards the profit that they're making from stocks. So hopefully if we put the values that we got for assets and then subtract the liabilities from it, we're going to get the total amount of what they have for shareholders' equity. And if you look at the bottom of that balance sheet, hopefully that number equals what the owner's equity should be according to that equation. And that is exactly what I mean by this balance sheet has to essentially balance. One side always has to equal the other. If you're ever looking at a balance sheet and one side of the equation does not equal the other, then that means that a company potentially either did something wrong unintentionally or intentionally. That's just something you're gonna have to dig into a little bit more. Now that's just the basic breakdown of what a balance sheet is, and hopefully this video helps. I really do plan on making other videos about this because of course I said this is part one. There are two more parts to a financial statement in all its glory, but we'll get into those later. I really feel like learning this information, despite how boring it may seem at the beginning, is extremely valuable for any type of investor, whether you're new like me or you're a veteran like somebody else, especially when talking about companies like this, where you're explaining to people why you're investing into them. Using a balance sheet can really support that. Make sure you watch this video, by the way. I really do appreciate you guys watching this video, and until next time, as always, take care.